Hello and welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast guiding you on your journey to becoming a vessel of unconditional love. And this is your host, Beck Milonas, High Priestess, Channel, and Activator. Join me on this series as I share reflections, insights, and channel transmissions from my journey of walking the initiation path. Each episode is a unique transmission containing supportive frequencies to facilitate the deepest healing, activation, and reconnection with your soul. I invite you to open your mind and set the intention to receive this episode into your heart space. Let's go. Welcome back, beautiful souls, to another episode of Cracked Open, a podcast about becoming a vessel for unconditional love. Today with me, I have the beautiful Chelsea Carter, Chelsea Renee, depending on how you want to call her. You can call her both of those things or neither of those things. You can just call her a beautiful being who is here with me. I had the pleasure of, did we actually meet in person? I can't remember. We met briefly, right? In person in Bali at the event.
Yeah, we met at Bali Bloom 2022.
Yep.
Nope.
It was fleeting. We didn't really we met, but we didn't really meet. And then we connected afterwards and about the next Bali Bloom, which never ended up happening. And we were like, there's co-creation, there's something here. And then we started following each other on Instagram. And I had the beautiful opportunity to support Chelsea in some of her mission, in some of her copywriting, which was such a beautiful co-creation. So thank you. This is a beautiful woman that I have on today. She's so strong. She's so fierce. She has such beautiful energy around sisterhood, around community, around tribe, around creating ceremonial spaces. To introduce her formally, Chelsea holds the mission to connect humans with their higher self, others, and nature. She uses her powerful breathwork technique, somatic breath activation, to unlock layers of your own truth and power. She's also a talented medicine woman. Fuck yeah, that you're claiming that. Medicine guide, meditation guide, embodiment coach, intuitive ceremonialist, sound healer, and more. In her sacred circles, gatherings, and retreats, she curates an environment for rewilding, embodiment, and inner transformation. Chelsea acts as a catalyst for transformation and change throughout her global community. And I feel we are both connected through some soul lineage to the priestess lineage, to toning, to angelic sounds, to music, to cacao, to lots of incredible ceremonial things, which we're going to bring and weave into this space. So let's see. No idea where this conversation will go. We have a few things floating around in the ether that we might tune into. But just dropping here and now, Chelsea, the first question I want to ask is, how did you come to be where you are now? Talk to me about your journey of awakening, of spiritual evolution, and what brought you to now serve women and men, but mainly women, in the way that you do. So just in your own words, introduce yourself, jump on, say, hey, I'm giving you the mic to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here to be where you're at.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Beck. I'm Chelsea, and such a beautiful introduction. I can't really say much more than what you've already said. The question, though, on my journey, it's a multi-layered question for sure. I think the real beginning of my journey started when I came to that, I cannot move forward in this way anymore. I came up against that wall of this is enough, enough is enough. I was working in a job that I was kept chasing things where I'm like, oh, I really love nature. I'm really interested in plant medicine. And I started finding avenues to do that in a professional environment, but it wasn't the right environment fully for me. And so at the end of this one job, I was a ski instructor, and I was like, you know what? I just wasn't happy. I was drinking a lot at the end of the days, just drinking a lot, ended up crying on the way home from work all the time, just feeling not even upset with my job, but feeling such a lack of purpose and a lack of connection with what I knew was out there. I knew something bigger was out there. And so really the beginning of my whole journey was saying enough is enough. And I went 100% all into my embodiment. I was also addicted to working hard. And so I had a bunch of money saved up. So I was like, okay, I can do this. I can I have some money in the bank. I can just go all in on me taking care of me. Me doing embodiment practices, started small with meditations, being outside a lot, then compounding with breath work and like hypnotherapy, EFT tapping, like all of these different modalities that I was trying on. And just started compounding from there. At one point, that was about a year, almost a year into that journey, I had this like voice come to me in meditation. It was like, hold a women's circle. It was very simple, very soft, very subtle. I had no idea what to do or where to start, but I opened up my home and I said, hey, if anyone wants to come over, I'm going to have a women's circle. And then things really started compounding from there. And that's kind of where I got to now, where I've, done a lot more space holding and yeah.
Amazing. And that story is like, we hear that story. Every single person that's come here has some variation of that story of I cannot continue to do things the way that I'm doing. I will check out. I will end my life. Like I can't, it's so true. Like we all have to feel this call within us to change something before we can take that action. So I see you for taking that action. I'm curious to know, your first women's circle, how did that go? What was that like for you? I feel the reason I say this is I feel that there's a lot of women on this podcast and even a few men who are listening to this, and they want to start their own women's circle. They want to start their own event, their own ceremony, their own thing, but they're terrified of taking that step, or they don't know how to start to put it together. So what was that process for you? What were some of the things that came up? Self-doubt stuff. What did you move through and bring that together? And if there was any mad fails or like funny stories, we're all here for them too. We all do some shit in the early days that were like, oh my God, I wish I'd known better. So any advice or insights into that for our audience, I feel like is the piece that is needed right now.
Yeah, no, that's, I totally agree. It's always good to know where all the trials and tribulations. So I had been holding medicine spaces for a long time at that point. So I had like a concept of how to like bring a group of people around medicine in a grounded way, but without medicine, I was totally clueless.
Can we be
so
specific here? Like what medicine specifically were you using?
Specifically mushrooms, sometimes okay. LSD.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And let's go to actually, I feel like that's the starting point, serving that stuff and being like, here's a real starting point, right? Like, I feel like a lot of people are called to work with plants or to work with a medicine or to work with a modality. So what was that action from you being like, I'm going to, serve this with a friend and we're just in this space, or I'm experimenting, to then be like, I'm going to consciously create these spaces where I'm holding this container. Let's talk about that journey first. And then obviously moving into the like the more circles and that sort of thing.
Yeah, completely. Okay. So when I was 14 heading, I think I was almost 15 years old at this point, I was already the drug dealer of my high school. So
we're here for the real vulnerable shit. I love it.
It's my truth. And like, I've reframed that to like the realization and remembrance that I've always been called to work with plant medicine. I've always been called to bring to be the medicine carrier and to support people. So like just being in that role, like when we would do mushrooms all together as friends, I was always the one that was giving out the mushrooms and always the one that people would come to for what's going on, advice, like talking. When I was in the group, I was always this unofficial guide of the whole group. And of course, we're much younger. It's definitely more in a recreational sense, but like, somebody's having a hard time. It was like, go to Chelsea, like Chelsea will take care of you. Chelsea knows what to do. And so like, I've always was in that role. And then growing, continuing to grow, always in that role throughout college. And then it was around a little bit after college, I started bringing like just me and a girlfriend up into the woods, and we would camp and just be on our own, and it'd just be like one-on-one. And we would just have these, I would kind of, bring in some more spiritual elements. And like, we would like, I would drop us into like a grounded meditation before we'd open. And then, how medicine does, like, it kind of brings, it brings those shadows to light. And I've always been that person for people where when, let's even say outside of medicine, like the shit is hitting the fan for people and they're like, call me up. I haven't talked to them in 5 years and they're like, I need Chelsea. And like, they all like, I've always just been that person for someone that slice of solace, like, hey, I'm comfortable here when things are getting tough. Like, I know this is a safe place. And so in that medicine space, you know, you're usually talking and then something will come up, you like kind of gloss over something, you share something massive and you gloss over and you're like, oh, never mind about that. And you like keep going. But I would be that friend that's like, hey, you know, what was that thing? You just kind of like, you know, moved over it. And I would help like really untangle those threads for people. And like, there would be profound shifts and people would like leave a weekend with me and like change some big things. And it was really beautiful, like in alignment. And it wasn't until I had one friend who was like, Chelsea, you do know that this is like a thing that like people do. Like I had no reference of that. I didn't know anybody else that wasn't doing like, I only knew people that were doing drugs at like festivals and stuff. Like I didn't know anyone that had the reverence I had that was like even calling it medicine. Like I just didn't have any concept of that. And I was in the cannabis industry too. So like, I felt like I was around a lot of plant medicine loving people, but I never came across anybody that was dealing with psychedelics in that like more grounded, reverent way. And so when she was like, Chelsea, people do that. People do this. She's like, I actually pay like $2,000 to go on a group retreat. And that was like not even close to as, you know, profound as what we just experienced in these 2 nights together. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. I just had no idea. And so that kind of opened my eyes. I still continued to do things the way I was doing it. And then I just started to slowly compound, started to be like, hey, I want to do this. I started telling people like, hey, this is what I'm doing, charging a very, very little amount, and just continued to compound and compound. And now like, yeah, people who have come to my events and whatnot have that invitations. Like, do you want to work with the medicine? I get a lot of referrals, and it just flowed naturally. And I think one thing you said at the beginning is like that calling piece. Like I always had that calling, and I didn't put too much pressure on how it was going to look or where I was going to end up. I had no like, oh, I want to be this. It was just like, it just kind of flowed naturally. And that's even the process with what I was sharing about before with like, I just was like, I need to take care of myself more. I need to tune into my vessel more. And then it compounded. I never was like, I'm going to start going all in on my work so I can start hosting retreats. Like it was never, I was just focused on what needed to happen in the present.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. And it's so funny how many of us have these backstories too of like, I had this conversation with someone, I'm going to have him on this podcast. We were talking about psychedelics and we were talking about, there was this movie I watched recently called The Jesus Revolution. And it's talking about the 60s and 70s and this whole revolution of the drug taking and the tap in, tune out, whatever it is, switch on, tune in, tap in, whatever it is. There's a saying. And that was, you know, what is it?
I was there's
in,
another one that's like tuned in and turned on, but I don't think that's it. But
it's something tap in, tune out, turn on, something like that, right?
I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember.
So basically the premise is that all these kids were looking for God, right? They were looking for this expanded state of consciousness and they were taking drugs to do that. And I actually, full disclosure, I used to take a lot of stuff when I was younger, from like 18 to 25. I experimented with a lot of different substances, because for me, that was my way of trying to find God, to try and find this connection. And now I have experiences where I don't need any of that stuff. And it feels like I'm on mushrooms all the freaking time. And I'm like, I wish I could feel sober sometimes. Right. So you realize you don't actually need that stuff to connect. But in this movie, they were all seeking that. And then this whole like Jesus movement happened, which I'm so here for because I fucking love J-Bomb. And yeah, it just made me think of that, like how so many of us are called to that path. And we carry a lot of like shame around it, where actually it's like, that was our doorway into expanded states of consciousness. And once we've found that doorway in, then we don't always need the medicine, because there's always also this risk that we use that as a crutch, that we go do ayahuasca 50. I know so many people, they're off to the jungle every 5 minutes to go do ayahuasca, to sit with the medicine. There's this meme that I saw. It's so fucking good. It's this guy crawling out of this dark tunnel, and there's a guy, walking out of the tunnel, and he's like, I might go sit with the medicine again, and his shadow is like, fucking integrate me. It's that, right? It's like, we need to actually sit with the medicine and integrate like what is coming through, and not just use it as this quick fix or this avoidance tactic. So it's so beautiful being able to weave that and use that, but also know when it's time for other things like breath work. And so talk to me about how you started weaving these other things into that space, and being like, okay, we can use medicine when it's appropriate and there's a time and space for it, and using it ceremoniously and consciously, but not relying on that. So what other ways are you using to expand states of consciousness? Like, you do the breath work. What does that look like in your containers?
Yeah. I totally agree. First, I want to say like that it's an open door that we walk through, and now that there's so many different avenues to tap into altered states of consciousness that doesn't necessarily need medicine. Breathwork 100% was a huge one for me. The reason why I'm like, again, called to that breathwork is because it was so profound for me when I went all in on myself. Like meditation, oh, I love meditation. There's obviously so many different styles of meditation. I was really drawn to mantra meditation, and that was really profound for me. Then I started experimenting with breath work, and I found a style of breath work that was pretty great for me. And it didn't have all of what I wanted. It felt like there was something missing. And that's kind of what led me to accidentally creating a breathwork technique, because I also did not have that intention. Like, I just was like, oh, I'm going to do this for myself. And then like clients were like, what do you do? And then it kind of compounded from there. But the way I love to bring breath into spaces is usually coupled with cacao, because I think cacao is such a beautiful heart opener. It's obviously a very gentle medicine compared to the psychedelics we've been speaking about. And it really invites people to come into that feminine part, like, that part of us that often in this society is, shoved away. I do have a lot of people in all different spaces of their journey in my containers. And so for new people that are fresh to this kind of work, like just watching them like be caressed by the cacao is really beautiful. That breath work just really opens and activates people. It's a sympathetic nervous system activating breath work. So, because there are so many different styles. And what I love about it is, I'm like, there's so many things. I think the first thing that I love about the spaces with breath work is that I always open up a space of like, anything is available here. This is for you. You are the guide. That's what I love about breath, is that it's our breath. Nobody's doing this to us. We have the capacity to lead ourselves through this thing. Of course, like the tools, the education it supports, but we are the ultimate masters. We are the ones breathing. We are the ones letting resistance come over and being like, I'm not going to do this. Or we're like, hey, like, we are the gauge of everything. And so, yeah, I just love that, because meditation, somebody is bringing that you into that state. I feel like breath work, like the invitation is there from others, but you are the one that is really bringing yourself into that state. So I love that about breath work. And yeah, just like that open invitation in my containers. So it's like, and anything's okay. Movement's okay. Screaming's okay. Laughing's okay. Like all of it's allowed. And I think the last piece I want to say is presence. That ability to be in the present moment is really amplified with breath work. I feel like just even focusing on your breath, even if you're not like wanting to go into a whole session, if you're like, oh my God, worried about the past, I'm thinking about the future, like just coming back at any moment during the day and just focusing on your breath and being like, I'm here now. I feel my heartbeat. I feel my breath coming in and out. And it's just that beautiful centering, like I'm here, I'm grounded. Yeah.
Talk to me about the word ceremony was dropping in, and like how one would start to cultivate a ceremony space? Or what do you think is important to create ceremony? Like, is it intention? Is it a structure? Is it a flow? Like, what makes something a ceremony and what makes something not a ceremony? And like, how can we cultivate more ceremony in our own lives, but also for those of us who are interested in like creating and cultivating spaces which are very ceremonial? Yeah, talk to me. Just riff on ceremony is the word that Spirit was saying.
Yeah.
Get her to talk about ceremony. She knows about ceremony. She's going to talk about ceremony. Okay, Spirit. She knows about ceremony.
I love Spirit. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think for me, ceremony can really, like, in the broadest sense of the word, ceremony can be anything and everything. It's the intention. It's what we infuse into those actions that we're doing. So like we hear a lot, like, life is a ceremony. It is, it can be. We can literally, the most, like, the thing that everybody does every day, going to the bathroom, we can literally take that as an avenue of like, oh, I'm in a releasing ceremony. I'm literally letting go of what's no longer serving me. Sometimes I'm attaching energies to it. I'm like, oh, I'm letting go of this, situation that is bothering me right now. And I'm literally letting it come out of my field. So in like the most general sense of the word, ceremony can be anything and everything. And that's ritual. Ritual and ceremony are like, hand in hand. Creating a ceremonial space, I also feel like there's a level of intention that can be felt. Like I think I can do, like, two people can do the exact same setup, let's say, structurally set up for a retreat. Let's, put that for instance out there, and one person can put a lot of like intention into choosing the crystals, into the layout of the space, to thinking about even the land that it's going to be on. And then the other person can just like happen to make all those same decisions, but have no intention and have no like that energetic like attachment to all of those decisions. Because the thing about meaning is that it's only meaningful when we attach the meaning to it. Anything can be anything, like anything can be just whatever, but we attach meaning to things, with religion, with psychedelics, like all of those are things that we are attaching meaning to. And so I think that's really where ceremony is based, is like, how are you attaching the meaning? And even speaking about that meaning. Like, so I like to talk about some of the elements I bring into space when I'm setting in containers, so then other people start to attach meaning to the things that are around them, that are holding them, as well as myself, the facilitator. I like to even sometimes like, yeah, just I always am acknowledging all of the unseen elements that are coming into a space and that are holding us too, because again, that's attaching more meaning to the experience that we're having when we're like, hey, spirit's here. Hey, all of our ancestors are here. Your spirit guides, your soul family, all divine beings of white light have come into this space and are holding you. And then people start to be like, oh my God, I actually feel felt or held. I feel that, and so I think for ceremony, it can be so many different things. I know I say the word ceremony often because I do feel I create ceremony in a lot of aspects of my life. And even when I'm like creating a more formal ceremony, if you will, it's about the meaning that we place into this space. And I also feel, to touch too, the knowledge that is compounded. I know you and I are both grid workers, and we go to all these different places in the world and we accumulate knowledge, not always in a, reading from a book or reading from a place. We're accumulating it in the ethereal sense and the unseen, unknown sense. And so even trusting yourself with that knowledge and being that channel, and not kind of letting your mind talk yourself out of the mystical experiences you've had and the knowledge that you have, also creates an even more profound ceremony. So
Hi, beautiful soul. Allow me to interrupt this broadcast for just a second. If you're a soulpreneur on a sacred mission, or just someone looking to connect with their soul purpose, their gifts, and their multidimensional self, I have something I am so excited to share with you. The Soul Mission Accelerator is possibly my most groundbreaking and expansive work yet. It contains 12 low-cost, high-potency sacred activations that will have you shifting through old limitations, patterns, karmic loops, and blockages at quantum speeds. These activations will support you with everything you require energetically to anchor in the timeline and reality you desire to create. If that means more soul clients, tribe, opportunities, and abundance, or just to anchor a soul purpose that is fulfilling and effortlessly abundant, you can grab $44 off the total price by using the code cracked open in capital letters in the checkout, or grab each activation individually as they call to your soul. Now let's get back to this episode. Yeah, and I can totally add into that. I'm here in Mexico and I had a session with a woman yesterday, a good soul friend of mine, to feel into like my business grid. And Adri's just been talking about this at the start of the show with you. Before we jumped on, I want to share this with the audience. Like, I am receiving such huge fucking like ancient technology, downloads, codes from the land here, from the Mayan ancestors, because I've had incarnations here. So it's like remembering really for me. And I had this frustration moment yesterday with her on the call where we were talking about this huge download I'm receiving around the 21 prophecies of the Mayan fucking calendar and all this stuff that I'm here to like transmit. And there was this moment of frustration of like, for me, when I receive, and this is kind of the message, like when you go to a land or a place, for some people, or even not in a land and a place, maybe you're receiving things from the current astrology or the energies, you receive them kind of like as information in your body, as codes, as frequency. And they have to like integrate in your body before you can put tangible words to what that is, or what that flavor is, or what that frequency is, or what the transmission is. And I get this frustration a lot of the time because I just feel all the energy coming in and I'm wiped out. Like today, I feel like throwing up. I feel very like out of it. And it's very overwhelming. And I'm like, well, that's great. But like, what does it mean for this physical reality? What does it mean for my work? What does it mean for like, am I supposed to do this as an offering? How do I even verbalize this? Like, oh, cool. Come to me and receive ancient codes from the Mayans. Like, what the fuck does that mean? Right. And sometimes it's like, we're not actually meant to know what that means. And it's a frequency thing that's transmitted in the space, which is what I love about, you know, ceremonies like you hold, or retreats, or even like plant medicine ceremonies. There's so much going on beyond the sphere of like what we can perceive. That is the energetic work that's happening, that's moving things through the field, and these unseen energies that perhaps those people who are coming to you are never going to know even, or have a framework of understanding around all those subtle things that they were receiving, that there's something in that frequency that they're coming to receive from you, that their soul has like signed them up for, right? So it's a message for myself as well, as I'm like, guys, just drop in what the fuck all of this means and intangible words. And it's like, she was saying to me, it's these 7 light language activations that you're meant to transmit. And I'm like, that's great, but how do I, like, what's the framework for that? Like, what are they going to do? Right. But it's actually, sometimes it's so beyond that meaning, because this metaphysical stuff, codes, you know, things from the land, things from our ancestry, things from previous civilizations, they're just so beyond the human language and beyond the human mind that we can't try and like communicate them. And if we do, it falls short. So I hear you in that. And I want to see you in that, because I know that you really curate your spaces. You let the land speak to you. I loved when you were talking about, when we were writing the copy for your most recent retreat, the specificity, fuck you, my ancestors. I love you, but I can't speak English today. You know the word that I'm trying to say, the specific nature of the place that you chose and what that grid was holding and that energy that was holding. So how did you see that come through in the ceremony? Like, was there any ways you could see, oh, I can see that these frequencies are what are coming through? Because I believe from memory, I kind of don't remember things after I channel them, but there was this new earth kind of frequency, this 5D frequency that was coming through of like freedom and play and joy. And did you see that coming through in the transformation that was offered for these women? And talk to me about that experience.
Yeah, completely, 100% completely. The land, so this was in Costa Rica for anyone listening, and there's obviously different pockets of every, you know, country. You know, country lines are also a new thing compared to the, you know, the history of the earth. And this space overlooks this area where humpback whales come to breed and to give birth. And so there is definitely this like very ancient whale energy, which has a lot to do with tapping into ancient wisdom. Like they even like reference like whales have this like avenue to the Akashic records, which, as we know, holds everything. And it's also this frequency of I I love I love that you were talking about that those unknown words, because that's something that I struggle. That's why I had you come in as a copywriter, because I'm like, I sometimes don't know how to describe what I do. Like for those interested in human design, I'm like a 2/4, and like that 2 is like, you don't know what it is you do, but it's super profound. But that whale energy was really profound in it. That joy and that freedom, I know that we were channeling and talking about as well. Really, for the women that were in that space. Okay. There were a lot of people in this specific container that were coming up against parts of their lives that I shared at the beginning that were like, they were at that enough is enough point. And so for them to come into a container where they felt complete and utter love for who they were, when they weren't experiencing that in their daily lives from their environments, to also have that space to go deeper with themselves and kind of even start to feel past feelings that they had suppressed, allowing them to come up to the surface and be felt and move through. So there was obviously like a lot of deep clearing and cleansing work. And then by the end, like there was this essence of joy and freedom. And, I don't ever have a plan for what retreats are going to look like. I kind of know what I'm going to do the first day. And then it's all about listening. It's listening to what the land is asking me to go towards. It's listening to what the group is ready for. One group can be ready for one exercise and it would be completely wrong for another group. And so this group like really was about anchoring this frequency of joy and love for the world. Like the very last day we did this anchoring ceremony where we were literally giving blessings and prayers and intentions for all women around the world, and then like anchoring them into the land right there. And it was really beautiful and really profound for myself and for the other women. And yeah, I guess what I'm thinking about right now is how true what you spoke about earlier of the words aren't always there, and it's okay. Like I've kind of learned to embrace that, especially when I'm talking about transformation, especially when I'm talking about these crazy women's spaces that I like I'm so honored to create and co-create with everyone that comes. Because the second I try to like really box things in with our English language, it loses a lot of its magic. Yeah. So I kind of lean into being like, this is indescribable. But I think I've also leaned into that in so many aspects of my life, like I don't need to know everything. That knowing that like, oh, I need to know what the framework is going to be or what this needs to look like, that loses the magic. It loses what happened. I know I was at a retreat myself. I can't remember which one exactly, but we were talking about how our mind loves to talk ourselves out of those mystical experiences. So I think I try to always anchor in and be like, you know what? I don't need to know what happened. I know what I felt, and just lean into that heart-centered, like that was real, that happened. And that's all.
That's so beautiful. Cause like literally just before we got on this call, I was writing this post on Instagram about like you co-create with your offering, right? In this way that you're a custodian of that offering doesn't mean that it's yours. You don't own it, right? And so we need to be able to be flexible and open to seeing all those moving parts, to pivoting with, oh, this energy shifted now and this is what wants to come through, seeing like particularly with group work, what I noticed with group work is like, it's the same for me when I run an offering, like a group offering. I have the kind of framework or the vibe or like the theme that I know is going to be the thing. But then each individual that comes into that space has their unique flavor. They bring their own guides, they bring their own frequencies, their own codex. And the way that you weave them all requires you to be listening and present to, okay, what's the moment calling for? What's the moment calling for? Where is the energy being guided? Where is the energy being guided? Even something like being on a specific land is going to shift that frequency. It's going to require you to do certain things like anchor those codes, right, in the grid or whatever that is. So it's so perfect because it's that balance of like, yes, when we look at marketing, and this is what my part of my mission is, to help people to put those languages behind the things that they can't express. Yes, we need to be able to give a framework of, this is maybe what you're going to experience. This is the flavor. This is the energy. So we can call in those souls. But it's the energetics beneath that is what's really going to call them there. Like those souls that came to that event would have felt like some sort of soul call or nudge to be there, even if your copywriting was shit because you didn't hire me or like whatever, right? Like they would have felt a call to be there because it's this soul experience that when we tried to put the human words on it, it's funny, like whenever I have a mystical experience, which is like literally every second day these days, my whole life is a mystical experience. But at the start, I used to try and journal them, or like when I do mushrooms or something, I journal and I try and like write down all the things that happened. And then I'd read over the journal or I'd explain to a friend. And I was like, this just doesn't really like do it justice. It doesn't give it the depth or the meaning or the, in that experience, what happened. And it's interesting because it's something that's felt and experienced and not something that you can verbalize. So we're trying to talk about something really fucking intangible here, which is funny because all the messages are always perfect. And spirit's like, see, Beck, you don't need to know what all these mind codes are. You just need to like trust. It's always perfect, right? So that's interesting. And I want to put that out there to the audience of like that piece of being so willing to show up and not know, and just trust that I'm being called to hold this event. I don't fucking know why. I don't know who's going to join, but I had this soul call, and then all the pieces will come together. And seeing your offering as it's a soul, it's an entity of its own that's going to co-create with you, and it's going to tell you what it needs, what it requires. Hey, Beck, I need you to run, or Chelsea, I need you to do a cacao ceremony because that medicine is going to bring out X element. This woman going through this thing, you need to now hold her as a pedestal or example to workshop something for everyone because there's going to be something in her experience that speaks to them. So the other thing that's actually being, it's beautiful the way that it's flowed into this topic, is how in a group space, particularly with other women, we can like weave our threads together, whereas like one person is experiencing something, or their vulnerable share is going to bring something up for someone else, and then how that enables this huge opening. So talk to me about this phenomenon. I know women particularly working together, this is really powerful. I only say that because I don't work with too many men in this space. I know that men also holding men is really powerful, and guys, come on, start doing it more often. But talk to me about the magic that comes and happens when these women start working together and like feeding off each other's energy and like impacting and influencing each other. What's that potential that you've seen for healing, for sisterhood?
Yeah, oh my gosh, you're so right. It amplifies the space when a bunch of women come together, especially with their hearts open and with, that attitude of like, I have nothing to lose. I think the first step of it is the vulnerability that people allow themselves to be in, because that's the first step. It's hard for a lot of women. I know it's hard for me. I've not always felt safe around women. I've definitely not felt safe to share what's truly on my heart and my past. And that can still be the reality for a lot of women. Just like even that, like, oh, it's okay to share. Oh, nothing's going to happen to me if I like share what's really on my heart. And so like that first like hurdle is huge, because then when people start vulnerably sharing and sharing their truth, sharing what's on their heart, other people start getting deeper permission. They're like, oh, wow, like that person really opened up, really shared everything on her, everything that's alive for her right now. And so I can too. And so first of all, that opening ripple is really profound and beautiful. And that's usually happens right at the beginning of my retreats. And it's like, oh yeah, we're ripping the Band-Aid off. We're all in this together. Every part of you is okay and sacred. Like we can hear all of it, including myself. Like I'm always, every time it's different. but I'm always sharing like my deepest truth, and I'm like happy anything is on the table. And I think like a little like asterisk there, like as a space holder, like we are the ones that also like anchor in what that frequency of the space. If we're coming in like guarded and like, oh nope, I'm not going to share, like people will energetically feel that and also act accordingly. Where I'm like, hey, all of me is here. I'm freaking human also. Like, I know I'm holding and creating the space, but I'm human. I'm here, and all of me is cool. So is all of you. It really is felt in the space. So asterisk ended. But I think one big thing that I feel that happens often when there's spaces with women is that people share something really beautiful and profound, and another layer of truth for other women is uncovered. Because also, like, you know, we all have like trauma, big T or little t, in our lives. And so a lot of that trauma we block out, or we forget, or like maybe someone sharing about a situation, they're like, oh my God, a really similar situation happened to me that I haven't thought about in years. And like, maybe there's another layer to go deeper in with that. And so I think that's what's beautiful, because we all have this collective experience as a collective of humans. And so even hearing other people share, it can open us up deeper into our experience. That's something I notice often with women. I think the last thing that's really beautiful and profound is healing that sister wound. Like, and I think this ties into what I said earlier of like my own experience of not always feeling safe with women. And so that has like, that created this like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to keep women at, you know, I was that woman, that girl that was like, oh, you know, like women are kind of tough, but like, I'm a guy's girl. Like all my like best friends were always guys. And because it felt easier, when in reality, like I was, I mean, of course, there are tough things just growing up in general, but I was just resistant to going that deep with myself and opening up that sort of relationship because of my past. And so when I started to do that work and started like really invite that there could be a new reality with women, especially as I'm growing older, like things got to be different than high school, right? And yeah, I think that watching that sister wound be healed in a women's group space is really beautiful. And really that looks like is accepting people for who they are and loving them. It doesn't mean that everyone leaves best friends. It doesn't mean that, you know, you're going to talk every day for the rest of your life, but it does mean that you're going to feel that respect. You're going to feel seen, heard, and loved by the other women. And that heals a lot, because you're like, oh, it's possible, like it's available. And that opens up your own, you know, daily life wherever you're at for those potentials of like, oh, maybe I can find a sister that's going to see and hear and love me for my shadows, for my, you know, past traumas, and like, and not just see me as that, see me as what I can, what I'm moving towards, what I'm evolving towards.
Yeah, for me, actually most of my formative healing was done in spaces of sisterhood. Most of my intimacy work, like, yes, I was calling in soulmates to trigger some shit and bring it up, but it was the sisters who were holding me, helping me heal. Like, if I didn't have that sisterhood, and I was the same, like I had a lot of wounding around sisterhood, comparison, not good enoughness, like all that bullshit, bullying when I was younger, which made me really like push women away. And also the mother wound also affected that. But it was actually in first, like learning to become intimate and vulnerable and safe with my sisters, that I was then able to start to do that with the masculine. So I think it's so powerful. It's so potent. There's something else you said. Yeah, that person that's like vulnerably expressing gives that permission. I remember there was this group container that I joined, and I swear to fucking God, spirit put me in there to be the channel for what everyone was feeling, but no one was saying. Cause it was like every day I was like putting my hand up and sharing. And I was like, here I go, me sharing. But like consistently through that container, I would have every fucking woman or man, there was only 2 men, but every person in that container would message me and be like, thank you for speaking up and saying that, because I've been sitting in the background too afraid to share it. And you sharing it has given me now permission to share. And so it's so important, this piece about like, even as a practitioner or a leader, being afraid to share your vulnerable truth because, oh, I have to be the space holder, I have to hold it together, I have to be like put myself with this perception of like I've got my shit together, whatever it is. Actually, that vulnerability, that truth, that messiness, that whatever it is, you and your authentic soul frequency and whatever the fuck that is in the moment gives those people permission to embody more vulnerability. And that's why I'm so open and vulnerable about my whole journey on here. And people might listen to me and be like, she's self-obsessed, she only talks about herself. But it's like, actually, no, that's your opinion. My journey is that I teach through my own lessons, my embodiment. And when I say, oh, I went through this thing, it's because I'm a channel for the collective. And anything that I'm going through, the likelihood is that the 90% of people are going through that as well. And so all the time, what I do with my content is I'm like, what am I going through right now? And what feels like it's actually a collective theme, rather than I'm just now projecting what I'm going through onto the collective and saying it's a collective theme. That's a different thing. But like, where am I actually, this is what the flavor is. And then when I share that, people are like, whoa, you wrote that for me. Holy fuck. And I'm like, cool, that was something that I was moving through, but I felt like maybe some other people were moving through. So it's like what I want to say is that there are some of us who have this role who are the ones to have the voice first, like to go first, to share, because others aren't comfortable to do that. And you speaking your truth actually gives them permission to speak their truth. And it's this beautiful unfolding that has happened. The other thing I see is like resistance to a lot of people wanting to do group work. And they say, oh, I get the best results in a one-to-one transformational container, and I want the one-on attention and support and all of that stuff. But actually, I prefer to do group personally. I prefer group because of this phenomenon that happens. And because of this effect that like, it's so fucking perfect. Every single woman or man who has joined any one of my containers, it's been perfect and divine that they were there because they've activated something in someone else, and something that they've shared has now changed the trajectory of the entire container. So if you have resistance to being in group spaces because you think, oh, it's not going to be personalized or tailored, it's like, no, just get a practitioner who can read that energy in the moment and know how to guide it, and trust that like you are called to that group, that ceremony, that experience, that community for a reason, and there's something in that for you. So to kind of come to closure, is there anything else that you're feeling you really want to share, or is real for you, or is true for you in this moment? Like drop in, just see if there's anything that's coming through. I feel like there might be one more piece here about something.
Well, there was something that you said earlier that I wanted to just like touch on, because you were saying like, how did you say it? You were just talking about like being vulnerable as a space holder, and like, you know, that wall that we can have up. And I just want to say like, because I think people forget that we can, you know, in this journey, we're doing a lot of mask taking off. We're taking off masks and coming back into ourselves. And we can very easily put on the mask of a space holder and be like, this is what it needs to look like. This is what I need to look like. And this is who I need to be taken seriously or whatnot. And I think like, yeah, for anyone listening, like being a space holder isn't you don't have to do or be anything other than yourself. Like that is what makes you a good space holder, is by emitting your authentic vibration. And that's going to attract the right people. Like Beck was saying, into the space, it's like the right people are going to find you. Like when you start to create that container, of course, like a little bit of, you know, foundation, you know, information, like to help, you know, have that masculine energy part of it is great. But I see a lot of people who are like, oh, well, I have to do this, right? Or I have to dress like this, or like all of these things. I'm like, you don't have to do any of that. Like that doesn't make you a good space holder. Your work and your connection to your heart is going to make you a good space holder. So I don't know. You said something around that, and I was like, I feel like that needs to be shared.
Yeah. And I think that bravery, that courage, that vulnerability are, to me, the authenticity, the integrity, and the heart openness are the hallmarks of a good space holder. Like if you've got that stuff down, the technique will come in, the you know, the structuring, all that other shit will come in. But it's like, as long as you're in your heart serving, and you're like, what serves the highest, what serves the highest, what serves these people, tuning into like what can serve them and me and the collective all at the same time, you can't fuck it up. Like it's pretty simple. You show up and you just say, let me be a channel for grace. And that's as simple as it gets to be, right? So I see you doing that, and I respect you for that so deeply. And I know that all the women and men even that come to your spaces are just going to have such a transformational experience, because I see that in you and I honor that in you. Chelsea, if anyone would like to come find you, be part of one of your spaces, collaborate with you, co-create with you, just check you out, how would they do that?
Yeah, the place I hang out the most is on Instagram. My handle is the Chelsea Renee, and it has 3 underscores after it. That's where you can find a lot of my up-to-date stuff and the link in my bio and whatnot. My business and website is heartcenteredhumans.com. That also has a lot of my information and offerings, from retreats to programs to certifications, all the good stuff. That's where you can find it.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Mummy, for coming on here today and sharing your frequency and your wisdom with us. Such a powerful soul. It's been a pleasure. And go check her out. She's amazing. I really respect the work that she does. And to all of you who are listening, thank you so much for being here, for listening. If you've liked this, please subscribe, give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Help me to get this magic out into the world. And so it is. Until next time, beautiful souls, I love you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Cracked Open. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share with a friend if this episode has served you in any way. For more information about the work that I do, or to get in touch with me, read the show notes or head to beckmylonas.com. Until next time, beautiful soul.